So, if you're not Canadian, you're probably thinking, oh wow, this week is such a huge W for the Canadian left. Timu Trump is out. Big liberal banker daddy is in. And we narrowly dodged joining the Western descent into fascism. The club is bumping. The ladies look good.
Во-первых, народная музыка не очень.
But for the progressive left wing of the country.
Obviously, I know this night is a disappointing night for New Democrats. We had really good candidates that lost tonight to the work that we did. So
We're not feeling so good. The NDP, the New Democratic Party, the last bastion of the Canadian left, has been wiped off the map. The Canadian left is cooked. The NDP went from 18% to 6% of the popular vote, from 7% of the seats to 2% of the seats, managing to absolutely blow it harder than ever before in the entire history of the NDP. They've lost official party status, and now their dear leader Jagmeet Singh is stepping down. So is it their own fault for being wishy-washy liberal ripoffs? Or is it because people were just afraid of splitting the vote and accidentally electing Maple MAGA? And what's next? Should they embrace their socialist roots, or should they just keep talking about their policy successes, or should they rebrand entirely? Well, here's how the NDP and the Canadian left can uncook itself, in my opinion. But first, the NDP used to stand for something other than New Democratic Party, but they're not exactly new anymore. But you can't really call them the DP, even though they are getting fucked by the other two parties. Nice! DP joke. Always kills. Like and subscribe. Anyway, the NDP did used to be overtly socialist, or at least they would call themselves that. But if you want to figure out whether or not they're real socialists, you'd need like a 2-hour bread tube style video, and I can't afford elaborate set design or bisexual lighting. Let me live. But they did provide a genuine alternative to the two big parties that were basically neoliberalism and rainbow neoliberalism. And they've accomplished a lot, even though they're very small. Universal single-payer healthcare, that was them. Tommy Douglas modeled it in Saskatchewan and then bullied the federal government into doing it nationwide. And for that, he was named the greatest Canadian by the CBC based on a Canada-wide survey. The NDP advocated for and achieved strong pension plans and worker protection, a whole whack of progressive social safety net type policies. They got it all done, all without ever holding the prime ministry. The prime ministership, without forming government, yeah. So how'd they do this? Well, the liberal and conservative parties basically trade places being in power. But when a party is in power, it can either be a minority or a majority government. Excuse me, why are you explaining this basic baby shit? Every Canadian knows this already. Listen, if I had a nickel for every time I, an immigrant, had to explain minority governments, I'd be able to afford a house in 1965. Okay, let me cook. So, with a majority government, the party in power has over 50% of the votes. They can do whatever they want. They don't need to talk to the other parties. However, a minority government has less than half the seats, so they'll have to negotiate with the other parties to stay in power or to get literally anything done. So if the Liberals have a minority, who do they negotiate with? Well, the Conservatives hate them. The Bloc Québécois only cares about Quebec. So you're gonna have to come groveling to the NDP. And that means that a liberal minority, that's where the sauce is. That's where most of the progressive stuff that Canada is known for, like universal healthcare or nationalizing oil companies, that only happens when the liberals say, fuck, fine, NDP, we'll do your commie shit, just keep us in power and pass our budgets and stuff. And that has worked really well for the NDP. During COVID, they got loads of concessions that helped a lot of people. For example, the $2,000 a month for basically anyone who needed it from the start of the pandemic until the vaccines were out. And a lot of people I know would have been fucked without it, including me. I would have been so fucked without CERB, gang. Hoo-wee. Thanks, NDP. And since then, they've forced subsidized childcare, anti-scab legislation, pretty decent but not universal dental care, and pharmacare, which, I mean, me personally, every time I hit the pharmacy and I get that sweet, sweet hormonal birth control that helps me not die during my PMS, #PMDD, I go, big ups Jagmeet. There's just one problem. Dental care, pharmacare, childcare, that was all already on the Liberal platform. During the pandemic, the NDP was just kind of forcing the Libs to extend the assistance they were already planning on doing anyway. So that's great that they got all that stuff for us, but what makes them any different from the Liberals? Well, in researching this, I came up against the same nickname for the NDP over and over again. One was dippers, which sounds like a slur against, like, bisexuals or something. Is she, a double dipper? Damn, with the hard R. Anyway, oh yeah, the other one, this one's important, was liberals in a hurry. Like, the libs kept promising stuff, all the various cares. They were like, guys, we're gonna get to it eventually. And then the NDP was like, or we vote you out. And so in this election, the NDP didn't get absolutely decimated because people hated dental care and they thought the government shouldn't have to pay for Lisa's braces. They got voted out because people were scared Pierre Poilievre was gonna sell us to the Americans for a crisp, brown, maple-scented $100 bill. And they figured, well, a vote for the NDP is like the same as voting for a liberal, so might as well play it safe and avoid splitting the vote. The NDP just couldn't beat the liberals but nicer allegations. And this meant that the messaging for lefties like me was, please dear God, vote for anybody but Pierre, instead of like, hey, vote for this nice, inspiring progressive party. So it's no wonder that so many NDPers, I'm not gonna say dippers, they switched their vote to Lib either because they saw Carney as a steady hand and a reliable father figure, or, they just didn't want to split the vote. Obviously, the NDP policies are further left than the other parties, like price caps and national rent control, but there's not really socialism, and they're not really that compelling either. Like, they're just band-aids on a bleeding, gaping, late-stage capitalism. These are policies that are, as The Breach puts it, pulled together not out of any overarching commitment or conviction, but based on an advisor's vague grasp of the growing popularity of insurgent democratic socialist politics elsewhere in the world. And as Steve Boots points out in his video about the NDP, they don't even really have like a broad statement of principles or party identity, just like vibes and a left of liberal platform. So who are the NDP? What do they stand for? Other than fighting for us, whatever that means. And this isn't just like my terminally online take. Polling shows this is a big problem for the NDP. The conservatives have a firm central message: change, small government, law and order. The liberals have a firm central message: security abroad, stability at home, a steady hand in times of geopolitical upheaval, big daddy energy. What does the NDP have? We're slightly better than the liberals. We're gonna make the liberals do what they promised they would do in their own platforms. We want to expand social services, maybe? There's not really a central vision. There's no identity. Now, from the color of my hair and general vibes, you'd probably expect me to say that the NDP has to become hard left socialist populist and bring down the decadent Canadian neoliberal capitalist regime with an orange fist. They definitely should steal some notes from the American left, which are at least sort of socialist and definitely populist. They're doing shockingly well, even though America is much more reactionary than Canada, even before Trump. And that's because they got a good-ass message. Nobody who works full-time should be in poverty. Billionaires shouldn't exist. We have to do a Green New Deal and do a big overhaul of American infrastructure. The millionaires and the billionaires. A multi-generational, multi-racial campaign of working people. I'm an American lefty too. I can rattle this shit off in my sleep. All of us can. The NDP are proposing some policies that are sort of in line with this vision. But the problem is, they're not proposing the vision. So should they say overtly that they're socialists? To quote the big man himself, Jack Layton, quote, "I think the old academic language of socialism is alien to most people. They don't know what it means, and we have to spend too much of our time explaining it to them. That's not productive. I find that the language of storytelling is more effective, like, let's get this housing project built, or let's stop our garbage from going up north. We're up against the biggest waste company in the world. We're going to take them down with grassroots action." People share our concerns, and they can identify with that type of language about very concrete things. I'm never going to use words like capitalism or imperialism. I'm proud to call myself a socialist, but I don't go around shouting it out. Basically, he said, we can run on socialist shit without forcing all our supporters to read Das Kapital. We can talk about things people care about. And what do they care about right now? Wealth inequality, economic collapse caused by a few idiots on the top 1%. It's not just the Bernie bros yelling about it anymore. It's everybody. Also, change, just generally. A lot of people who voted conservative, they don't love conservative policies. They just wanted any kind of change from the status quo. That's why Joe Rogan swung his vote from Bernie to Trump. And that's why at least this one video from the CBC suggests that a lot of voters swung from NDP to Conservative, because the NDP does not represent change any more than the Liberals do. And guess what's gonna happen next? Nothing's gonna change. We got Stepdaddy Carney, and things are gonna stay the same or maybe get worse, and people are gonna go, oh yeah, I voted for the Nothing Changes party. Of course nothing changes. And then that's either gonna be a gigantic W for the Conservatives, assuming they can find a more charismatic leader than carbon cuck Milhouse, or it can mean another orange crush. But only if the new NDP leader puts forward a bolder vision than both these parties suck, and here's a handful of progressive but not necessarily socialist policies, or we're gonna make the libs do their campaign promises. Okay, so maybe this election, everybody freaking out about getting literally annexed, wasn't the best time for a bold new vision, but it's gonna be real soon, and we better have one ready. The NDP got a lot done under the minority government, but they don't get any credit for it, and I think that's because they lack a compelling vision. If you're an NDP fangirl, you've probably heard the final words of Jack Layton's final letter. Love is better than anger, hope is better than fear, optimism is better than despair. But before that, he also gave a compelling vision for the party and for the country, and you guys can just use it for free. He wrote it for you, and here it is. Canada is a great country, one of the hopes of the world. We can be a better one, a country of great equality, justice, and opportunity. We can build a prosperous economy and a society that shares its benefits more fairly. We can look after our seniors, our children. We can save the world's environment. We can restore our good name in the world. We can do all these things because we finally have a party system at the national level where there are real choices, where your vote matters, where working for change can actually bring about change. There's implications of policies, but mainly it's a vision, a kind, fair Canada. And since Jack Layton, the defining word of the NDP is optimism. So if we're so optimistic, why are we hiding behind these liberal, pro-capitalist policies? Why not be optimistic and really send it with like a bold platform and a bold vision to reshape Canada instead of just making it a slightly more bearable neoliberal hellscape? Why don't we tackle the root issue of groceries and rent being too expensive instead of just putting price caps on them? It's hard to say what this vision should be or what the party identity should be. Maybe something like
renationalize all public services.
Absolutely.
Right?
All right, we'll say that into the camera.
Renationalize all public services.
That's Avi Lewis, and in my interview with him, I kind of got a glimpse of it. Apparently he butted heads with Jagmeet, but he had a vision to return the NDP to its worker socialist roots. But we're going to need a lot more of him, and also he didn't win his seat because people were scared. Maybe the NDP should lean on a single aggressive policy like wealth taxes or universal basic income or workplace democracy, like an actual progressive party. And also, part of it needs to be electoral reform. That needs to be central. If you're an NDP politician, you need to be talking about first past the post the way Polyev talked about the carbon tax. It's destroying our country. It's ruining our economy. It's a threat to democracy, like yesterday, okay? Beyond coming up with based and inspiring policies that feed into a central vision or whatever, we need to be so fucking annoying about voter reform. If people don't get sick of the NDP talking about electoral reform, if it's not on all of our signs the way that Axe the Tax was, we're not doing our job, especially because Carney said he'd be open to it. In fact, 33% of Liberal voters were strategic voters. And some of those 33% were my friends who were just like, I don't want Pierre in there, so I don't know. NDP door knockers said that the number one most common response from people was like, hey, we like the NDP, but we're afraid of Polyev, we're afraid of Trump, we're voting Liberal. And even the Conservatives got shafted because of first past the post. Like, they got proportionally less seats than they should have based on the popular vote. Work with them. So this party was decimated by both fear of Trump and Polyev, and by not distinguishing themselves enough from the Liberals or presenting an inspiring vision for Canada. So what now? Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but what I'm going to do, despite spending 10 to 15 minutes bitching about them, I'm going to join the party so I can vote for the new leader, and I'm going to try and get involved in other ways and vouch for the candidates who seem like they have a serious, at least somewhat socialist vision for the party. And I'm not really sure how I'm going to do that, but like, So whether you voted NDP or rage voted Conservative or held your nose and strategic voted Liberal, if you see a future in the Canadian left, I'd say now's the time to put on your cute little helmet and your high-vis vest and start rebuilding this bitch from scratch. This party being decimated is good for Canadian leftists and progressives because now we can start preparing for the inevitable Liberal flop. Everybody's disappointed in them, the next lost Liberal decade, and we can say, hey, here's a new left-wing progressive party that we shaped in our image to remake this country into a not neoliberal hellscape. So, that's my video for Wednesday. Sorry if the editing's terrible. I made it in one day. Like and subscribe, especially if you're Canadian, my God. And see you next time.